The wrong man won. In 2007, two fighters walked into a cage. One had spent 10 years preparing for that moment. The other almost didn't show up. 90 seconds later, the wrong man had won. At least that's what everyone believed. But they were wrong. Because this isn't a story about a fight. It's a story about what happened after the fight, and why the man who lost everything ended up finding something the winner never could. We grow up believing life follows a simple formula: work hard, sacrifice, stay disciplined, and eventually success will arrive. It's one of the most powerful stories ever told. And for Ethan Kross, it became a religion, not an idea, a religion. Every morning at 4:30 a.m. while the city slept, Ethan ran. Not because he enjoyed it, because champions ran. When friends went to parties, Ethan stayed in the gym. When relationships demanded time, Ethan chose training. When life offered comfort, Ethan chose suffering. Again and again and again, for 10 years. His entire identity became one thing: future champion. Everything else disappeared: his hobbies, his social life, his personality, his sense of self. All of it slowly merged into a single goal: winning. And that's what made him dangerous, but it also made him fragile. Because when your entire identity is attached to one outcome, you create a disaster waiting to happen, even if you don't know it yet. By 27, Ethan was exactly where he had always dreamed of being. One fight away from a world title shot, one victory away from changing his life forever. Sponsors were calling, journalists were writing articles, fans were buying tickets. The story was perfect: the hard-working kid, the disciplined warrior, the future champion. People love stories like that because they reassure us. They tell us the world is fair, they tell us effort gets rewarded, they tell us what we want to hear. Meanwhile, 3 states away, another fighter was living a completely different reality: Mason Reed. And if Ethan represented discipline, Mason represented chaos, missed opportunities, bad decisions, broken promises, lost fights, late nights, regret. His coaches had once called him talented. Now they called him unreliable. The saddest part? They were both right. Mason possessed natural gifts Ethan never had: explosive power, lightning-fast reactions, rare instincts. But talent without discipline is like a sports car without fuel: beautiful, useless. And slowly his career collapsed. By age 30, Mason was preparing to leave the sport. Not dramatically, not emotionally, quietly, like someone giving up on a dream they no longer believed belonged to them. 3 weeks before everything changed, he applied for a warehouse job. That was the future he expected. Not fame, not championships, a warehouse. Then chance intervened. 12 days before Ethan's biggest fight, his opponent suffered a serious injury. Promoters panicked. Millions of dollars were suddenly at risk. They needed a replacement. Fast. Phone calls spread across the country. Most fighters refused. The risk wasn't worth it. The timeline was impossible. Then someone called Mason, and he said yes. Not because he believed he could win, not because he saw destiny, because his rent was overdue. That's it. One decision made for entirely ordinary reasons, a decision that would alter 2 lives forever. Fight night arrived. 20,000 people filled the arena. The atmosphere felt electric, the kind of energy that convinces people they're witnessing history. Maybe they were, just not the history they expected. Round 1 began. Ethan looked magnificent. Every year of sacrifice was visible. Every hour, every scar, every lonely morning. He was faster, sharper, smarter. The gap between them seemed enormous. Commentators practically began discussing Ethan's future title fight before the first round ended. The script was unfolding perfectly. Hard work was winning. The audience relaxed. The ending felt obvious. And that's exactly when everything changed. A patch of sweat. That's all it was. Not a dramatic mistake, not a fatal error, a patch of sweat. Ethan stepped forward. His foot slipped slightly, his balance shifted, his guard opened. For less than half a second, Mason reacted. A desperate punch, a routine punch, A punch thrown thousands of times in gyms all over the world, except this one landed perfectly. Ethan collapsed. The referee stepped in. The fight was over. 90 seconds, 10 years, gone. The internet exploded. People demanded explanations. There had to be a reason, a secret, a hidden strategy, some deeper meaning. But after countless slow-motion replays, the truth remained painfully simple. Luck had entered the story, and luck had chosen a side. People hated that explanation. Because luck feels offensive, it ignores merit, it ignores sacrifice, it ignores fairness. Most importantly, it reminds us how little control we actually have. A week later, reporters surrounded Mason. A week later, reporters surrounded Mason. What was your secret? They expected wisdom. Instead, they got honesty. I got lucky. The room laughed. Mason didn't. No, really, I got lucky. Nobody wanted that answer. People prefer stories. Stories make life feel understandable. Luck does the opposite. Meanwhile, Ethan disappeared. No interviews, no social media, no public appearances, nothing for months. People assumed he was devastated, and they were right, but not for the reason they thought. At first, Ethan believed he was grieving a fight. Then he realized he was grieving something much larger, himself, the person he thought he was, the future he thought was guaranteed, the identity he had spent 10 years constructing. Because if he wasn't future champion, who exactly was he? For the first time in his adult life, he didn't know, and that terrified him. Most people think suffering comes from losing. Often it comes from attachment. Ethan hadn't merely wanted success, he needed it. He had built his entire sense of worth around achieving it, which meant losing the fight felt like losing himself. The cage had exposed something uncomfortable. His dream wasn't the problem. His dependence on the dream was. A year later, Ethan finally appeared in public. The auditorium was packed. Everyone expected anger, bitterness, resentment. Instead, he said something nobody expected. The fight wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. The audience grew silent. The worst thing was realizing I had spent 10 years postponing my life. Silence. I told myself I'd be happy when I became champion. Another pause. I just never asked what would happen if I didn't. That clip spread across the internet. Millions watched it. Because deep down, almost everyone was guilty of the same thing. I'll be happy when I get the promotion, when I make more money, when I buy the house, when I find the relationship, when I achieve the goal. Life becomes a waiting room, and happiness becomes permanently delayed. While Ethan was rebuilding himself, something very different was happening to Mason. Winning changed everything. At first, sponsors arrived, interviews arrived, money arrived, fame arrived. The world suddenly cared about him. The lucky punch became legendary. His face appeared everywhere. People called him inspirational, a symbol of perseverance, a fighter who never gave up. The problem? Most of those stories weren't true, and Mason knew it. Every compliment felt borrowed. Every headline felt exaggerated. Every interview reminded him of something uncomfortable. The greatest moment of his life had happened partly because of chance, and deep down, he knew it. Pressure began to grow. Fans expected greatness, promoters expected greatness, media expected greatness, but greatness never arrived. He lost his next fight, then another, then another. The miracle never repeated itself, because miracles rarely do. Slowly, the attention disappeared, then the sponsors, then the headlines, then the applause. Everything that luck had given, luck eventually took away. Years passed. Mason faded from public memory. The winner became forgotten. Meanwhile, something strange happened to Ethan. The loser became remembered. Not because he won championships. He never did. Instead, he became a coach, then a mentor, then a teacher. Young fighters traveled across the country to learn from him. Not because he had all the answers, because he had confronted a question most people spend their lives avoiding. What happens when life doesn't go according to plan? One evening, a student asked Ethan a question, a simple question. Do you ever wish that punch had missed? The room became quiet. Everyone wanted to hear the answer. Ethan smiled, then said something remarkable. Every day for the first year. A few people laughed. Then one day I realized something. The student leaned forward. If that punch misses, I become champion. He paused. Maybe I make more money. Another pause. Maybe more people know my name. Then he smiled again. But I never become the person sitting in front of you right now. The room fell silent, because everyone understood. Sometimes the thing that breaks your plan saves your life. People often ask whether success comes from hard work or luck. The older Ethan became, the less interesting that question seemed, because both matter. Hard work matters, luck matters, timing matters, opportunity matters. None of them exist alone. But there is a deeper question, one far more important. What happens when luck goes against you? Who are you when the plan fails? Who are you when the dream disappears? Who are you when the world doesn't give you what you believe you've earned? That's the question that defines a life, not success, not failure, that. The luckiest punch of Mason's life gave him everything he wanted, and slowly took it away. The unluckiest moment of Ethan's life took everything he wanted and gave him something better: perspective, freedom, a life not dependent on outcomes. And that's why years later people remembered the man who lost and forgot the man who won. Because the fight was never the real story. The real story was what happened after. When one man discovered that winning wasn't enough, and the other discovered that losing wasn't the end. Which leaves us with an uncomfortable possibility. Maybe the goal isn't to control luck. Maybe that's impossible. Maybe the real challenge is building a life that remains meaningful whether luck chooses you or not.